the definition of what is a quadratic equation. It's an equation that can be written in this particular standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers or constants. A cannot equal 0, because if a did equal 0, you don't have a quadratic equation anymore. You would actually have a linear equation. And going back to polynomials, remember a polynomial is a addition summation of a bunch of different algebraic terms. So the standard form of quadratic equation actually has 3 terms. You start with your variable squared, then you have your linear variable, and then you have your constant. These also form a second degree polynomial because it's a polynomial with a highest power of 2. Okay, so any time you see an equation of this form, it's a quadratic equation, and these have particular ways that they can be solved. Later on in the course, we're going to actually even look at how to graph equations of this form because they have very nice features from a graphical perspective, but we're not going to be talking about that right now. Rather, we're just going to be talking about how do I solve for this variable x whenever I have a x squared. Okay, so anytime you see an equation that has an x squared or y squared or any variable squared, this is the different methods in order to solve such an equation. Okay, well, one of the things that is going to come up in solving such equations is known as the zero product principle. This is when you have the product of 2 algebraic expressions that equal to 0. Then at least one of those factors is equal to 0. So what is this saying? It's saying that this A and this B are representing 2 different algebraic expressions. When you multiply them, the result is 0, or the product is 0. Then according to the zero product principle, both either or would equal 0. And we can see this numerically. If I take any number, let's say 10, and I multiply it to 0, I get 0. If I take a really big number, something like that, let's say, and I multiply to 0, I get 0. So anything times a 0, it will always give you a 0. This is a case where the algebraic expressions a and b, they have some unknown variable associated with them. But I do know that when I multiply those expressions, regardless of what that variable is, the multiplication results in 0. Hence, at least one of them must equal 0. And we can use this to help us solve for the variable and many of these problems, especially when it comes to quadratic equations. Okay, so just some highlights regarding solving quadratic equations. If the highest power of your equation is 2, so you have, again, your variable squared, x squared, y squared, z squared, doesn't matter. Whatever your variable is, if you have a squared somewhere in the equation, then you have a quadratic equation, and you should be able to formulate the equation such that it is in the standard form where you have ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. So if your quadratic equation, if you had something like this, something like this is still a quadratic equation because I have a x squared term here. It's just not in standard form. So I can rearrange my equation by moving the 3x squared to the other side to get negative 3x squared plus 7x plus 2 equals 0. Once it's rearranged, now we have a quadratic equation in the standard form. So anytime you'll get an equation and you see a squared term, just know that you can make the necessary rearrangements so that you have a quadratic equation in the standard form. So that's what the bullet point number 2 is saying. Begin by bringing all terms to the left-hand side so that you have 0 on the right-hand side. Arrange terms to obtain the standard form. Once it's in the standard form, then we can apply the appropriate methods to solve the equation.